I am extremely excited to have James Yu here with us. Uh, there he is on stage with me. James is like basically a Renaissance man. I think it's the accurate term. He's a speculative fiction writer whose work has appeared in Uncanny Magazine, Vice Magazine, Fireside Magazine, various sci-fi anthologies. He creates AI and generative art. He's worked on virtual reality products. He was the co-founder of Parse, which enabled a new generation of developers to build mobile apps and was acquired by Facebook. Now he's building Sudowrite, an AI partner for creative writers, which is why we're all here. There's recently like an amazing profile written on it in the New Yorker. And I'm just going to let James take it from here to explain like what is Sudowrite, where did it come from, and with this thing, seeing is believing.
Yeah, thanks, Jay. Yeah, so that's a good sum up of what I've been doing. I think the biggest parallel is I used to work, building tools for developers, and I spent 2 years basically focusing on the craft of fiction, mostly short stories. And then when I started working with tools like GPT-3, Sudowrite was the thing that came out from that. So basically I love building tools, and now so I'm building a tool for writers alongside my co-founder Amit Gupta. So first off, I believe in centaurs. So not the horse kind. I believe in the centaur future of AIs and humans working together, not in an adversarial manner, but when the whole is greater than the sum of the parts, right? So Sudowrite kind of represents that in terms of writing. So it's an AI writing assistant. The human is in control. I see it as like a tool, like Photoshop is for visual media. So for example, like when we talk to visual artists all the time and they say, I use Photoshop, you don't like question that. It's like kind of like air, right? It's like, okay, that's very obvious, right? But when I was building Sudowrite, so we sort of realized that there's not really that equivalent, right? We have like word processors and grammar check, right? But a lot of those things are sort of at the surface level, at the very individual word level or like sentence level kinds of help. So what Sudowrite represents is sort of the next level of that, right? What if there could be an AI brainstorming partner or critique partner for your narrative fiction, for your screenplay, basically whatever you want to write, having a tool for thought, right? So that's at the high level what Sudowrite is. I've been using AI systems to help me with my short story writing for the past year or so, and it's been very fruitful. So Sudowrite sort of represents how I see it working in my workflow, and I think it represents sort of a beginning of a new era of machines working with humans to write cool stories. So right now it is very focused on fiction writing specifically, but it can also work for other kinds of narratives as well. So I'm very happy that Jay invited me today to do a demo. So this will be the most extensive demo of Sudowrite. So please bear with me. This is sort of new for me as well. What we're gonna do is play around with the existing story, The Matrix, in Sudowrite, and then let's try to craft the story together as well. So when we get to that point, we can make it much more interactive, and we can call out ideas and just make a fun little story together.
Yeah, we're flying by the seat of our pants here. So, expect a little bit of creative chaos, which I think is a good metaphor for Sudowrite right now. Before you kind of like show us how it works, I'm curious, like you mentioned GPT-3. For people who aren't familiar with GPT-3, what is it? What is like the state of artificial intelligence right now? Are we about to like have machines, plug us into the matrix and harvest our energy? Like, what? Give us some like context on where AI actually is.
So GPT-3 is the latest and greatest natural language generator. The easiest way to really explain the power of GPT-3, so it's made by this company called OpenAI, and basically it has hundreds of billions of parameters. It's been trained on the entire internet, crawlable internet, historically since the year 2011. The most profound thing about GPT-3 is that its comprehension of human text, text written by humans, has risen to almost the level of human reading. So it can probably pass like the SAT comprehension test, which is crazy. So that means that it is like autocomplete on steroids, because if it can understand almost any kind of human written text, it can also generate it to an extent where we may not even know it was actually human generated. So, for example, I've done lots of blind tests with people with the system, and a lot of times there's chance. You just don't know whether it's writing an email or a piece of narrative fiction or a screenplay. It's very versatile. So that's the other thing, that GPT-3 is also not. It's very general. It wasn't trained to do fiction, right? But because it's read basically so many books, so many literary analysis, it's able to help in that regime. Whether it's going to harvest our energy, no, it's not going to do that. I don't want to speculate whether in the future we will actually enter into a matrix-like world, but maybe we can speculate with GPT-3 today.
I mean, let's get started. It's funny, like we're gonna rewrite some of the Matrix, right? Like Morpheus has this quote and he's explaining to Neo when the beginning of Act 2, and Neo sort of uses his eyes for the first time, sees the real world. He says, what we know for certain is that at some point in the early 21st century, all of humankind was united in celebration. Through the blinding inebriation of hubris, we marveled at our magnificence as we gave birth to AI. I must say, I find it almost funny to imagine the world slapping itself on the back, toasting the new age. I say almost funny.
Cool. So yeah, we can dive in. Let's do a quick introduction of the high level features of Sudowrite first. So let's remember what the Matrix scene is, just like as Jay just mentioned. Neo going into the real world for the first time. Remember, he touches that mirror, right? And it sort of engulfs him. It's kind of a harrowing scene. We kind of take it for granted now, but I remember sort of my teenage self seeing that. I'm like, holy shit. So it's a very visceral scene, right? So let's pretend that we're writing a novelized version of it. So this is the main editor in Sudowrite, just any text editor out there. But on the right-hand side is where the AI functionality comes in. So let's say that we're working on the novel here. Neo looks at his hands. His fingers are distended into mirrored icicles. They melt rapidly. The mirror gel comes to life. It crawls up his arms, creeps up his neck. Right? All he wanted to do was escape his boring life in his cubicle, and now he's going to die. So let's say that we get to this point where writer's block. Like I just don't have enough energy to keep going. But I know what needs to happen next. He needs to enter into the real world, and other harrowing things happen, right? So the main functionality that we have in Sudowrite is something called Wormhole. So what Wormhole does, it instantiates multiple versions of yourself in multiverses. All those versions look at the text that you've written before, and it gives you options for how to write the next few paragraphs. So what we can do is position the cursor where we need a little bit of help and click on Wormhole. So it'll give you a few options here. So continuing this text, right? So it's something to say for a good cause, but he didn't know that yet. As far as he knew, there was no cause worth dying for. So you can see that it really understands sort of the tone, right? And the content of what's happening here, right? Something bad is happening to Neo. And by the way, this is unfiltered, right? So you might actually see some pretty provocative stuff coming out from the AI because it's trained on the entire internet, right? Here's another option. He's going to drown like this. Black spot spreads across the mirror gel under his chin like a shadow. So as you can see, like this is why going back to that Photoshop analogy, right? It's an interactive system, right? So you can take little bits and pieces. Let's say you like this one, you can insert this one, take little bits and pieces of this, being like, oh, I like how the black spot, maybe we focus on that black spot, like spreading across the mirror gel, right? And let's say that we want a little help on, we want to make this mirror gel come to life, right? So you can highlight that and hit description. And this will give you sensory description. The AI is going to look at that and be like, okay, what kind of sensory descriptions can we have for this mirror gel? Texture of sea anemone, maybe. It's like a smear of lipstick smeared across an old photograph. These are metaphorical. You can have smells, no smells, okay. Reeks of antiseptic, like a hospital or a lab. You can have sight. Looks like an abstract canvas, a sea of black specks the size of a basketball swirling and moving. That's kind of cool, right? So you can like basically take that and put it into your story, right? So you see, like it's very very interactive in that way. And what I've been able to do is, you know, as you're working on a story, maybe you are in this mode to be expansive, right? You want to be provoked. So this is like the opposite of focus mode, right? For a lot of editors, every editor has focus mode. But why isn't there a provoke mode? Right, so this is kind of like that provoke mode when you need that other input. Sasha Stiles is a poet I follow online. I like how she used the word prosthetic imagination for this type of AI, that you can have this kind of imagination that helps you, right? Helps you discover kind of what's inside of you already. So this is at the sort of the
James, where does this stuff come from? Is it like, is this original, or is it like just scrubbing the internet and kind of, you know, stealing at will? Like, where does it come from?
So it's a gigantic neural net, right? So it's basically looking at the words that have been written and what are some of the high probability words that could come next, as if you just gave this paragraph to a human and say, okay, can you write the next paragraph that sort of follows the flow of this? So if you give it original content, it's basically pumping out, you know, stochastically like original content as well. So that's one of the things. We don't actually claim any copyright. Sudowrite doesn't claim copyright on the things that it generates. You're able to integrate it into your work as you see fit. That's kind of the high level. So that we've seen wormhole and description. So now, and we see how this can work inside of like a particular scene. So let's move on to like, what if we want to alter kind of what the matrix is about, right? Let's brainstorm a little bit with the AI, and then maybe you guys can help me with this and see like where we can go. So my idea for this is, so I have the whole treatment for the matrix here. Which treatment is basically kind of a summarization of the plot in movie parlance, in Hollywood parlance. So all the three acts here. Let's go to the end of the movie. So you remember when Neo saves Morpheus, right? And he needs to now escape with Trinity. So there's that pivotal scene in the subway, and Agent Smith goes and he shoots the payphone, I think. And so Neo is left to fight Agent Smith. So let's change this. See, it's here, but instead of running away, Neo turns and faces Agent Smith head on. They engage in a crazy, gravity-defying martial arts fight, and Neo pushes Agent Smith into the main tracks and kills him. Let's make it a bromance instead. Let's say that Agent Smith wants to be friends with Neo at this point and tries to convince him to have a pacifist ending for the Matrix. Why does everything have to be so violent, right? So let's work with Wormhole and see what happens. Let's see. Neo raises his fist, but instead of fighting, Agent Smith waves his hands and materializes a table full of food and wine. Neo, we must not fight. We are friends. Okay, at this point, let's see what Wormhole gives us. But Smith, I know Kung Fu. Neo kick. See, so like the AI is like, oh no, we got to make this like a fight scene, right? Beg pardon, Neo says. So if anybody wants to go with any of these particular directions, let me know.
Yeah, feel free to type in chat which one, A, B, C, D, or I think we have E.
Yeah, we have E as well.
And we can take the most popular one and continue. What's the name of this movie? You can't call it The Matrix anymore. It's got to be like Mr. Anderson and Me.
Mr. and Mrs. Anderson. No, yeah, Mr. Anderson and Me is pretty good.
People, we got 3 C's.
See? Okay. So let's try that. Okay. I didn't actually read this one yet. We must not fight. We are friends. Why are you eating? Why aren't you eating? Because I don't believe it. Okay, let's not have him fight. Can you pass the potatoes? Howard. Sure. They begin to drink wine, and okay, let's have another wormhole here.
So are there any rules for kind of what you just did there in terms of continuing, like the potatoes and the wine drinking?
Any rules?
Yeah, basically like, how do you know sort of like how much is enough to get wormhole going again?
Yeah. So this is a little bit contrived because I actually don't work with Sudowrite in this way. This is sort of almost like the Sudowrite AI maximalist kind of way. This is almost like choose your own adventure. I tend to use wormhole where there are very specific plot points that maybe I'm really stuck on, right? And I want to just flesh out kind of the next thing. So I don't tend to do this kind of like, oh, just write like a few words and then do another one. I think other authors might. We have like hundreds of authors using us right now. There are maybe veer on like doing that more, right? I think it is something to be careful of too, right? Because I think you do need to be mindful of, you still need to have your own craft, right? You're not just blindly putting, so if you notice, every time I insert the text, it's purple. This is to remind folks that this is raw AI text. You should probably edit it, right? And make it your own in that way. So this kind of exploration is good for, I think, a first draft, right? Where you just need to get to the ending. You're like, this is the shitty draft, right? Just like, and I need a little help doing that. I tend to use this a little bit more strategically in later drafts when I want specific plot points, or if I want like specific wording ideas. You can, for example, say like, and then Trinity enters the scene and she is pissed that Neo isn't defeating Agent Smith. Okay. You can do a colon, and then you can basically have the AI do a little brainstorm on like, okay, what could that be, right? Neo, what the hell are you doing? Oh, so like Neo and Trinity fight now, right? Okay, that's interesting. Maybe. Defeats his teacher. Well, yeah, Trinity's not the teacher, but sometimes you get a little confused. Neo, don't you get it? He intends to kill you. Who is he? Eating dinner. Yeah, I like this one. Agent Smith is kind of nonplussed by all this. Is there something wrong, Trinity? Neo, get up. He isn't real. You know that. Oh, I'm afraid he is quite real. So.
Right. Suddenly it's opening up almost like new reflections on the themes of the Matrix. Like what is love between the two of them? Is this real? A simulation of the Matrix in an agent form and a human that has entered the Matrix.
And we also have tones in Wormhole. So you can say like, oh, I want something ominous to happen next. So you can put a little filter on this. This is almost like a Photoshop filter. Oh, Agent Smith points his hand at her. The image of Trinity disappears. A black man pulls up. Okay. Okay, more punching. See the AI. So here's the thing, like when we're using the AI for a well-known script like this, it knows the script, right? It's read the script of the Matrix. So it is like trying its hardest to be like, I know there needs to be a fight scene here, right? So typically this won't actually happen when you're using your own manuscript, because it's like, well, it's not a well-known manuscript, right? But here we have that sort of like demo problem.
And if let's say you kept like sort of inserting, is it going to sort of naturally understand like, hey, we're headed towards like a climax in the story, or would it just go on forever? Is like, where does sort of the writer's knowledge of like story structure come in here?
Yeah, so it will sometimes end the scene. So it will know that. So Wormhole, the AI has a good sense of when the scene is probably ending. So a lot of authors, like when you put it at the end of like your scene, it will sometimes be like, okay, chapter 3. It'll be like, okay, here's the next chapter, right? But you can also steer it, right? So you can say like, then Neo says something that pulls the whole scene together into a satisfying conclusion. Let's see if this works. Oh wait, I still have this filter on. Let's take that off. It's not gonna be. It's gonna try to make it ominous. Why can't there be P. Smith? Why do we have to fight? We'll always have the Matrix.
So that one's getting meta.
Yeah, it's getting meta. So sometimes you get this sort of meta because it's AI is like, you kind of I'm kind of breaking the fourth wall here, right? It's like the scene. So it will also break the fourth wall in that case. Knuckles, okay. We're hungry. Can you make us some sandwiches? See, it's like, do Neo and Trinity unplug Morpheus and dumbass tank returns? Have you been killed? Yes.
Right. It's
okay.
Like it's like it just like drop some acid or smoke some weed or something.
All right, so this is, he can't control me. It's scary when you realize Neo really does intend to just sit there and eat dinner with his enemy. Okay, so this is kind of trying to conclude it. It materializes a conductor hat and says goodbye. So that could be like that could be the end of your shitty draft, right? So you can see like, okay, then you can like start a new scene, and then but again, like as Jay mentioned, like this is no excuse for ignoring your own craft, right? You do need to go back in there, sort of make this make sense. Like, is it actually, are you paying off this scene correctly? Are you moving the character development forward? There's no excuse for that, right? For just like, oh, I'm gonna just shunt all this AI text in there. I mean, you can do that if you want, right? But I don't, at this stage, even with the latest GPT-3, like you need the human in the loop. You need to be able to steer this story.
Cool. Okay, so what if we like, what if we tried another way of using this? Like, start from scratch. How would that work?
Yeah. So why don't we have people throw out some log lines? So like, what are some? Let's write a really short story together, like a few hundred words or so, and then see where it goes. I have a few ideas here, but we don't have to necessarily use these. So one thing is that Wormhole can also be used to brainstorm ideas. So you can give it a list of things like this. Here's some plot points. Man named Chester wakes up, discovers that his body is made out of tofu. Maybe. I mean, it seems like a nice Murakami like short story or something. So you can do a Wormhole here and be like, okay, here are some other ideas. History professor was found dead on the floor of office. Or if anybody has like a specific idea for a story, like put it in chat and then we can try to riff on it.
My pitch is a vampire who loves the sun and a computer programmer who hates going outside, fall in love in a world where ninjas reign.
Okay. I mean, we could start with that. So there's another tool that we have, Sudowrite, called Twist. So what this can do is gives you particular story turns or plot twists given a premise. So we can put in, I guess, let me just make more fantasy. Vampire who loves the sun, who hates going outside, right?
Yeah.
Fall in love with world where ninjas reign.
Yep.
Okay. All right, let's see what the So the idea here is like it will give you sort of twist endings for this. No make, okay. Sometimes it refuses, like there's no twist. Okay, nasty civil war between the vampires and ninjas. The winner is Vampire King Akamaru, who promptly announced Akamaru
Interesting.
City is to be the capital of
That's
all.
got some energy.
So, yeah, like elaborate suicide simulation.
Too dark.
Yeah. Shortly after their wedding, the vampire utters a prophecy that will turn him into a beast. Okay, definitely got the fantasy tropes in there. Also, I guess Scott has one. An aging muffin barista must make the perfect scone recipe to save its family. This sounds like a literary story. Let's see what this gives us.
So it's generating like endings, or is it just plot points? What are we getting
a
here?
mix. This will be a mix. So you can give this a whole like story summary, or you can give it a scene summary. It'll give you plot. Basically, the idea, what we prompted the AI is, give us a twist or a story turn that is satisfying but unexpected, which is kind of what you want, right? When you're thinking like twist ending. The day before the baking, the barista wakes up to find his daughter and his girlfriend have killed themselves. Wow. Okay. Maybe this is where the literary realism coming through. Okay. He tastes his own death when he tastes the scone. Okay. Protagonist, little Irishman, made perfect scones. She sees a photograph from her neighbor who uses his own agency to make the scones in the mid-1960s. Yeah, very specific. Which is what you want, right? I mean, the AI will keep you very specific.
I like F. The scone recipe is not a scone at all. It's a recipe for the perfect fudge covered muffin, because it's like the muffin barista has to learn through the course of his or her journey that it's not actually a scone that's the solution to the problem. It's a fudge covered muffin.
Wow. Okay. That's interesting stakes here. We could try that. Anything else catches anyone's eyes, we can do that as well. So
it's a world where baristas are pastries is sort of the world of this.
Elaborate attempt to woo his ex-wife. Interesting.
So B's got a lot of story in it also.
Stories on the same as film restaurant. Find the right ingredients.
And it's got time travel. I love how it just is
the old man finds himself experiencing
as
love
well
with
as traveling through time.
Not entirely. Thanks, AI. Like I wanted you to do. I wanted you to come up with the actual, not like entirely surprising. Sure. I mean, we can just start with this.
Yeah, it seems good because it seems like it's got a lot of stuff in it. We know that it's like a journey, a travel log kind of story. The barista's going to find ingredients.
What's the original?
And we got, maybe he realizes that it's not about a scone. It's about.
Wait, do baristas make scones? I don't know.
It could be a baker. maybe it's a baker.
Yeah. Let's see. Sometimes it's good to put the synopsis at the top. So this can also key in the AI. Okay, so I sometimes use possible names for an aging that must make Bob.
And somebody asked earlier maybe if we could use other tools like What If and Summarize. So just putting that out there in case they're useful for this.
Yeah, Mr. Macaroni. These are old muffin maker. It's not that great. How about Florian?
Florian sounds good.
Okay.
Although I kind of like pecan, because isn't it ironic that a muffin baker is named Pecan?
Okay, let's do it in present tense. Pulls out another tray. Wait, what are we doing? An aging muffin must be. Oh my god, this is such a. Okay, pulls out another tray of turned again, he says.
Right,
Okay.
because he's got to be. It implies, I guess, that he's got to be struggling at the start, right? That
Yeah.
it's a real trial to
All right.
actually perfect the scone.
All right, Grace. All right, so we've entered a new character. That's good.
Maybe that's his daughter.
Maybe. With glove hands that used to move bread through the bakeries. It seems like it's like veering into her story, so let's not do that. Wait, so what? Okay, what's the next plot point? All throughout the spring, traveling. I have to go to.
We need to understand the stakes too. Like, why is the
Yeah, it's true.
restaurant failing? I mean, she could just say, if you don't make the perfect scone, you're going to die, with the knowledge that the restaurant has failed.
We're not going to make rent.
We're not going to make rent. And the rival scone store next door is going to put us out of business. That's Scott's idea.
Rival scone store. Okay. What would that store name be? How about Katz's Bakery? Katz's Bakery. Line outside of Katz's Bakery. There. Gestures to the empty room.
Perfect.
All right, let's see. All right, let's see what Wormholes has him say. We were number one once, Grace. Don't forget that. Why couldn't they just take them?
Interesting. Like the first one, because it mentioned time travel. The first one is interesting because maybe he goes back in time to when he was a young man, finds the scone recipe and brings it back.
Okay, sure. I couldn't we just stay number one. Sometimes like AI can make logical errors. Seems like a continuation. That's not pecan. Okay. Should we introduce the time machine?
I mean, maybe. What does what if do?
So what if Wormhole sort of acts at the prose level of the scene. Basically, it's like writing precisely the next words, right? So what if does is it analyzes the scene from a plot point of view and gives you ideas for what the next plot point is. So we can try that. So what if they were happy inside, but then they discovered their products were actually repulsive to customers? Okay, sure. Grace and Pound make a whole new batch, but this time they are a success. Too easy. Pecan is trying to make the perfect scone recipe. We already know that. With his cane. Okay. The argument is about who gets to prepare the secret family for the competition. That's interesting. We should try my recipe. No, it won't work. It's too wet. Scones, your scones collapsed last time. Pecan says.
Right. You're so old, you can't even remember what a good scone should taste like.
Sure.
Then maybe that's the impetus for the time machine. He begins to reflect on the last time he had a perfect scone, and it was in his youth in Paris. I feel like we should go to Paris in a time machine.
Sure. Let's do that. Cue this up. He had the perfect scone at history with his parents. Sure, that makes sense. Where they would die during Mr. Rarities. Okay, here we can introduce. Almost burned down. I fixed it. Not the most compelling, but let's try it.
Yeah, I mean, it ratchets up the stakes though. We've got a building drama now. They're willing to risk the bakery to get the perfect scone.
Fine, you want to go whizzing through time? Yeah, you go. I'm not going to go risk it. A little on the nose, but okay. So here we could show off expand. Let's see if this works. Expand is like the most experimental feature. So expand is basically like, is very maximalist. So you just describe the scene and it will expand it. Pecan goes into the time machine and travels back in time to Paris, where he faces peril. Try
Perfect.
that. Yeah, loses the thread.
Right, it's long. I mean, interesting is like, yeah, the interesting is like you're not supposed to be here. I like kind of how it provokes ideas. It's like, oh, maybe there's a character who's like recognizes there's, this person is not where he belongs.
Right. You can also try wormhole to do it. So you can give it sort of the scene summary. He encounters Descartes. Okay. Why not?
Why not?
Maybe this is off. Descartes shoves a scone into Pecan's mouth.
I'm just thinking about how do we pull this all together, right?
Yeah.
I think it should be a good scone, right? And he thinks he's solved the problem, and so let's find one where he is satisfied by Descartes' scone, and then goes back in time, but when he returns, something has gone wrong. And so the lesson that Pecan has learned, Melissa calls for E. Oh, it might have disappeared, or maybe it's down there.
E? Puts it in fresh.
He represses the urge to choke Descartes.
He puts his...
It feels like this is one of those stories.
Well, I think his grace is not there, right? So it doesn't quite make sense. He puts his... Let's get a good description of this scone. Smells like autumn, sure. The end of year bonfires and leaf blowers. Maybe not leaf blowers. What does a leaf blower taste like? Smell like? Let's see, metaphorical. Boiled starfish. Ugh. Ripe peach. That's good. I like this. Okay. Again, this is very maximalist. I don't usually do it like this. Okay.
So by maximalist, you mean we're relying on Sudowrite a lot?
Yeah. I don't usually do that when I'm. It would be more like a 30%, 20% kind of thing.
Sure.
Remember the recipe that he had forgotten years ago. The 12-step method that yielded the most moist and succulent scones he had ever tasted. Okay.
Perfect. Like, what about like with a whoosh, she was back in the bakery? And then one maybe to give us the way to the ending. Like one way that I've liked to use Sudowrite is I've done like, and and then something incredible presented itself, or like he never believed what he saw next.
Yeah, that's a good way to, because it's going to try to take card again. A white owl on the handlebars. The bakery Utons had opened down the street. No, I think it needs a little bit more guidance.
Well, does anyone have an idea for how this story ends? Maybe we can get the human touch in here. He's gone back in time, encountered Rain Descartes. He's obtained a scone, brought it back to his daughter, supposed to save the bakery. Do we want a happy ending? Do we want a tragic ending?
These are all sort of.
Okay, people want a happy ending. So
happy ending?
Right.
Okay. These are incredible.
And maybe the landlord's there too, and he's like stuffing his face with the scones, and you could see how maybe we could use describe to describe the like look of ecstasy on the landlord's face. Maybe the landlord is like, "Don't bother paying me. The scones are so good. I'll just take a batch of these every month." I like Melissa's idea. The scone has gone through time travel. It's everlasting and feeds the world. Zach says the landlord now accepts rent and scones. And maybe we can give this like a little moral to cap it all off.
Okay. Where's your why is this going glowing? All right, so it wasn't magic, it was physics. Okay, let's see. This one's giving off a ring of light to softly illuminate the entire kitchen. Discover that and regenerated.
Zach says the scone is magical, and when planted in the ground, produces a tree of golden scones.
Okay.
Maybe he plants that piece.
Okay. Ooh. Okay. Pasted wrong. Let's see. Okay.
Oh, maybe how about like,
sometimes it thinks it's like the end of the story, so it's making up like author names.
How about like now Pecan and Grace, like they start, they basically, the scones solve world hunger. So how about like Pecan and Grace decide to become like do a lot of charitable work around the world, and they bring the scones around to people who are having trouble affording rent and give them to them so they can keep up their livelihoods. And all the landlords are in incredible shape because, to take Leanne's idea, these scones are magical and have no carbs.
Well, okay. I mean, this is a, albeit very on the nose ending. On his deathbed. Okay, yeah. Sure. The end. See, so now the wormhole is like, it's detecting the patterns of the ending. of a short story. It's been
And a
able to,
fairy
it's
tale
been
too,
ingrained
right?
to that. And if, yeah.
This
And
does
then
feel
it
kind
starts
of
to
like fairy
break the
tale.
fourth wall.
Right.
The magical ingredient. See, then it starts doing meta-analysis of the story that is just read, essentially, because it's, it knows all of literary analysis inside of its neural net. Read student sets. Oh wait, this is like, okay, maybe this is the follow-up.
Right. That's part 2.
It's sometimes like, okay, is this a film now? But so this gives you a pretty good flavor of
What you can
of
do.
how the system can work. And I sort of take this for granted now, but like it is very profound that the AI can really it understands story arc to a degree, right? Because it understands like, oh, this is sort of the ending. The story is about wrapping up. It sees the signals of that, right? It also sees the signals when there's like rising action. It would be like, oh, I'm gonna give you more rising action. So in that way, it's actually good for craft as well. Like if you're using it mindfully, because then if you see these 10 signals, you're like, oh, maybe I am sort of ending the scene. Because I feel like when I was first starting writing fiction, it was very hard to like, how do you end the scene? How do you begin it? How do you keep rising action going? Wormhole can sort of extend that for you.
Yeah, I mean, this is incredible. I mean, I guess before we cap it off and go to discussion and Q&A, like we need a title, I think. Can Sudowrite give us a title? Do we have a good title?
Sure, we can try. For the story about I'm drawing a blank.
Oh, we're gonna give it the perfect scone.
Pecan.
Pecan. That's pretty good.
Yeah, it's good.
It's gonna be hard to top that.
The scone at the end of the world. And then we can do wormhole, see what it says.
Hot scone, time machine. That one's great.
Golden scone. Sure. It's not.
We got a +1 for pecan pecant.
Mixed scone. The last scones. Saved by a scone. A little bit on the nose. Baked in Berlin, glazed in London, baked in Paris. Baker's tale.
Oh, pecan pecant, the baker's tale might be.
Yeah, that's not bad.
I like that. Let's go with that.
I like that. Yeah, I like that. Okay, sure.
Winner.
Definitely needs editing.
Definitely needs editing, right? If anyone wants to volunteer to edit
this is the first shitty draft, right? 600 words.
And we got 600 words in 20 minutes of a shitty draft of a complete story, relatively complete, right?
Sure. Yeah, we got the beginning, middle, and end.
I'm sure if you gave this to like, if you give this to a writer or a group of writers, like, there's stuff in here that could turn into something, there's a seed of something good.
Yeah.
Cool. Thank you. Melissa asked before we go into the discussion, does Sudowrite work with screenplay formatting? Do you have screenwriters using it?
It does. You can give it, of course, it won't be like Final Draft in that it will like format it correctly. But if you start writing things like exterior, like barn, and like it will actually pick up those cues. Can even try it real quick. Exterior, barn, day, pecan. How did I not know I own this barn? Let's see. This may not be enough prompting, but we'll see. I was here about you. See, so now it's like interior bakery. Listen, that scone was fantastic. Descartes, does someone have a perfect scone? I have a perfect scone. Wait, what are you doing? See, so it picks up those cues, and then it will. And obviously, if you have a full screenplay and you can like paste it in, it will do a much better job at following that tone. But of course, your formatting will be screwed up if you like paste it back in the Final Draft.
All right, cool.
I think a lot of our
definitely-
screenplay writers do it for outlining too, because that's useful for any kind of form.
Yeah. So I mean, that was amazing, amazing demo. This is kind of mind blowing. I mean, I feel like I'm not used to it yet, even though I've used it a bit, and it still feels like magic. And I don't know when people will get used to it.
Yeah.
The biggest question I kind of have is like, so you've now like you're creating generative art. You're also writing stories with Sudowrite. Like, how have you used it, and like how does it like affect your workflow? And are writers like using this and like publishing work with it? Like, how does that, like, what's going on like right now in practice?
Yeah, people are using it in many different ways. We had Stephen March wrote a New Yorker article about Sudowrite recently. He also used it to write a short story that was published in the LA Review of Books, where he actually stated like what 31.3% of this story was written by an AI. So that's very, very precise like attribution. But you don't have to do that. So you don't have to attribute Sudowrite at all. We have Darusha. She recently published a poem using which was collaborated with Sudowrite in Strange Horizons, which I love that publication. And so that's actually I didn't actually even show off all the tools. So she used the poem tool, sort of a poetry generator as well. We can give it sort of the themes of the poem and then maybe the first few lines, and it'll finish it off. Which I've actually tested that with some poet scholars, and they were basically tricked them most of the time, which is pretty insane what the AI can do. For me personally, like the thing that actually spurred me on to build Sudowrite was I was writing this sci-fi short story, and I was sort of in that phase of this like draft 2 or 3, and I was just like, I don't like the ending. It's like okay ending, you know. It's about the premise was about a woman that she is in this dystopic world, and where everyone is sort of has an implant in their brain, and it's and everybody's thoughts are sort of shared with each other, and she wins the lottery to be able to broadcast her thoughts to anyone in the whole world for like 5 minutes. So that's kind of the premise of the sci-fi short story, and I had it sort of ending like she decided to be silent instead of saying anything, which actually caused the world to go into havoc because everyone was used to the implants constantly chirping in your brain, right? So this is sort of a play on like social networks and news feeds. So I sort of had that. I was like, like guttural screams. Like everyone's like, why is it silent? I'm like going crazy. So I was like, that's a little on the nose. I didn't really like that ending. So I gave, at that time, Sudowrite didn't exist. I gave GPT-3 to sort of that ending and like, okay, give me the next paragraph. What it did was it sort of like twisted around and said that the system would actually damage her brain, right? In the end, and like, and it wrote this phrase that was, I can't remember. It was like the system abhors it abhors silence the most, and she realizes that because she's silent, it like damaged her brain in a way that she can never speak again. I was like, holy shit! Like, I mean, I didn't use that particular ending, but like it actually changed the whole story around for me. Like it reflected like a different theme in the story about like what does it mean to rise up again, like to resist a dystopic like totalitarian government, and like if you don't resist in the right way, if you do it head on in that kind of way, it's like bad, right? So it actually like I actually gave me the sort of the bits and pieces to actually go and rework the entire story, right? It showed me a different facet of the theme of the story. So I think that's where it can be really powerful, because that goes beyond just like, oh, describe this apple in like a certain way, and like, okay, yeah, that's really helpful, you know, like, and there's lots of writer tools for that too, like writers lists, and of course Sudowrite is great at that. But to be able to give you sort of this high level thing that you get from critique groups, right? I mean, this is kind of feedback that you're looking for, right? That you want to be able to accentuate certain parts of the theme. And when I saw that, it blew my mind. And I was like, I gotta build this. I gotta build this tool and like make it specifically for narrative writers, because that is so powerful. So something I'm working on now is actually a critique mode where you can give it your entire story and it'll reflect on it and give that sort of the essence of a critique group at the end, like reflect on the theme, areas that you may want to explore more. So I think that's like a very compelling facet of what this tool can do.
Yeah, you mentioned that you were using that with your critique group. How like the other human writers sort of feel about it?
I mean, it's great. So so in our critique group, we just do the usual going around and giving our feedback on each of the stories. And now we basically insert the AI as one of those people. I try to not actually be too prescriptive in how the AI outputs it, because I think it can be really off too. It can be like regurgitate sort of literary analysis and be like, you should show and not tell, like it's just like, well, not always the rule, right? But the reaction's been great. It's because it's been able to pick up themes and stories that are different, right? Or maybe it makes you think differently about your story. So it's a welcome addition, and it's just an extra reader. In other words, it's like a machine reader. Like you can add that to the corpus of voices that you have in the critique group.
Yeah, that's so interesting. Melissa says she would pay a lot of money if it could read and generate a log line, which makes me think that Hollywood would also pay a lot of money. And so, like, what do you think about that aspect of where this goes, right? Like, this is GPT-3, like GPT-8, movie studios, Netflix, publishers, huge companies who do a lot of writing. Like, what are they doing with this sort of power, right? Like, is it going to be the end of all writers? Or is it going to be like all writers have superpowers? Like, what do you think?
Yeah, I think a lot addressing like GPT-3 and GPT-8, I do think it's kind of like Moore's law, because right now GPT-3, as you can see, it's pretty good at generating like the next few paragraphs. But I didn't show you, but if you keep like generating and be like, okay, can you generate the whole short story for me? Not really. It'll become like a Dada-esque kind of surrealist kind of story. It doesn't really work. It can't, partly because this working memory basically for the prompt is too small to fit like an entire novel inside of it. That being said, I do believe that as we get to GPT 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, like Moore's law, it will be able to eventually write a whole coherent story. We're probably like 5 years away from that. It's hard to make those like years description predictions, but for example, right now it can generate a whole poem from scratch, right? And because it can sort of fit in that working memory. In terms of how it will change the industry, it will, and I think that there will be a rise of AI writing workshops. Like I could definitely see like writing conferences being like, all right, so here's tips and tricks of like working with your AI writer, right? And I think there will be a rise in business contexts, like copywriting, a lot of those things. Like maybe a lot of these writers will become human like AI editors, right? You can just have it generate 100 taglines, and you can like use it basically like a writing room like buddy in that sense. In terms of like sort of human writers, I firmly believe that human voices will still be in the loop, that we want like authentic human voices and their stories. I do think in Hollywood, it's already here in some way, because I think that like when you're looking at a blockbuster movie, like most of them are written by so many different writers and they've gone through so many revisions. It's gone through a corporation. And I think a corporation is kind of like artificial intelligence. Just, it's not like it's made out of collections of people and lots of different kinds of best practices and like movie tropes and like formulas. So in that sense, I think it's already there. I mean, I don't think the next, Marvel movie, like if you figure out like parts that are written by AI, I don't think anyone would give a shit, right? I don't know. I would be like, okay, yeah, it's enjoyable, right? It's great. Now we're talking about like a novel that is written by a human author and their own authentic voice. I think there'll always be a market for that, because I think in those kinds of cases where if AI wrote the whole thing, it's like we are actually drawn to those books because we're drawn to those voices. But are you drawn to like an AI voice in that way? I think it would be kind of a cultural shift if that ever happens. I personally, if I can maybe enjoy a book like that, but I think there is something about the subtext of a human voice where if I know there's a real human that wrote it, that's going to add that extra layer of value and like that experience for me when I'm reading that book.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Like, Tolstoy wrote War and Peace like a long time ago. That still, stands the test of time. It's still enjoyable to readers today. So like, if it's good, it's good. If it touches us, if it moves us, it's good. If it makes us want to act, it's worthwhile writing. If it creates meaning, it's worthwhile writing. It is interesting to think that maybe like GPT-3 is sort of the beginning. Like you imagine, the Matrix, you imagine these sci-fi manifestations of robots and sentient AI. It's interesting to sort of contemplate like how this seems to be like the sort of through line to get there is going to be through like artificial intelligence understanding of the written word and language and how to communicate. And it's kind of like in its infantile stage right now. Like you said, like we're probably not, it's hard to guess, right? We're definitely not 50 years away from this revolutionizing writing. Might be five years, could be 10, but it's like it's going to happen in our lifetimes. So yeah, it's really thought provoking. You mentioned the question, which I think we could pose to everybody, and then open the floor up for questions. Like, what do you all think if there's a New York Times bestseller, and it's you've read it and it's incredible. It's like the next Harry Potter, or you name what genre, thriller, like Gone Girl or whatever. And then like a couple of years later, it's discovered that it was entirely written by an AI. Like, how would that make you feel?
I think it depends on how that provenance of the story is marketed to me, right? How I find it. If it's like, oh, it's about the experience of a refugee, and like it's like their close, like first person experience, I would feel duped. I'll be like, that's not the AI didn't do that, right? So I think it depends on the story, right? Whereas if it's a Harry Potter, like I might be fine with that, right? It just depends on. I think we do need to see it through the lens of the piece itself, right? And if it's a good story that touches on sort of the human, is authentic in terms of the human elements and everything. I mean, if you go even further with this, I mean, I think one of the reasons why I feel almost squeamish about this, because like, wow, this is just a collection of bits, right? It's just a computer doing this. It doesn't really understand. Does it really understand love? But it's it's read the screenplay for Casablanca. Does that mean you understand love, right? It's like, but what if you embody this AI? So let's go even like more speculative. What if you embody this AI in like a physical body, and it like travels throughout the world, talks to people, has experiences, right? So becomes maybe less of a simulacrum, right? If you can give it this. So we've actually encountered this in the poetry world. Like GPT-3 is not good at generating rhyming poetry, or like sonnets, or things that have sonic elements in the poems, because it doesn't have ears. The ways it splits up the words is not like how we analyze it as humans. We sort of sound it down in our brains, right? So GPT-3 is not good at doing that. If you even explicitly say like, I want like a lush sonnet, that is like Shakespeare, it doesn't do a good job of it, because it doesn't deem those qualities important. It sees it is how it splits up the word is like very it tokenizes the word in like very weird ways. That being said, you can optimize it and make to do these kinds of things, but that's just like one example, right? And there's going to be lots of other examples where it doesn't really understand the world. Like a famous example is on the AI weirdness blog, it's like you can ask it, oh, how many eyes does a horse have? And it'll say oh, it has 3 eyes. It has 2 eyes on the inside, 1 eye is on the outside. It's like these words these words on their own make sense, but it's like that's where it's sort of it breaks down in terms of its understanding of the human world. Maybe that's actually good for a surrealistic like story, right? But going back to that sort of provenance, right? Does the author need to have these experiences? And in a lot of those cases, they do, right? I think that is kind of the reason why you're reading those stories. And I think in those cases, like we shouldn't have the AI write those stories, or at least I wouldn't really. It would sort of suck the enjoyment and sort of that profound nature of discovery. I would feel duped.
Right. Yeah. Zach says, are we judging? There's a lot of ways to frame it. Are we judging based on the value of expressive art? Are we judging based on entertainment value? And Leanne says there's already debates on types of writing. Like Stephen King claims he can tell the difference between a plotted novel and one discovery written. And I'll just add to the debate. And I think that's kind of right. Like we're going to be asking these questions as this happens. I mean, it's happening now. We're asking these questions. Forecast 50 years, just like kids today are being born and they've never known a life without the internet. We're going to have kids being born who never knew a life without AI writing. And so it's just really fascinating, I guess, to really sort of contemplate what the world looks like when, this is in the hands of everyone and advance further. Yeah, kids are already generating their English essays.
Oh yeah, this could definitely pass like a high school lit course, because you can make it if you're just judging by the essay. Because yeah, you can give it like a short story like The Lottery, and it will generate lots of analysis and write a complete paper for you. So I think some kids are actually using GPT-2, because GPT-3 is still very hard to get access to generate literature papers. And there actually is an influx. I've heard from some editors. I think maybe Rajiv was one telling me about this. Like there are poetry editors that are seeing poems that are like very obviously machine generated. But as we see, it's going to get better and better, right? It's going to be harder and harder to detect over time.
Yep. Yeah. Zach compares it to like creating nuance. People have like more nuanced preferences, similar to how people perceive music now. Like some people dislike EDM. Some people would never bother attending classical music. Some people will never bother reading AI generated stuff. And Rajiv says, reading something powerful from the human experience is a form of validation. I'm not alone. I am understood. GPT-3 takes it to a different level. My experience is statistically common. I love that. It's a good way of framing it. Scott says Leanne had another question earlier. What's the minimum max text that Sudowrite can work with?
Oh, so that depends on the context, but in general, Wormhole can take up to around 1,500 words. Of a novel, like it could be a whole scene too. So it's pretty flexible in that manner. That is like one thing that the steering is helpful. Like if you can give it bits of synopsis along the way, it can help keep it on task. But around like a few thousand words, less than 2,000.
Very cool. Yeah, and we can open the floor to any questions. There's actually like a microphone to the right of the chairs. It's a very tiny microphone. It takes up one tile, but if you want to talk, just walk up to the microphone, stand on it, and that'll give you broadcasting power. Or feel free to use the chat. We're gonna make sure everybody in attendance gets access to Sudowrite, and so thank you to James for hooking that up and for the demo and the examination of all of this.
Hey, Jay, first off, thanks for organizing this. Super fun. I actually don't have a specific question, but just wanted to break the ice and say thank you to James. I remember, I think briefly, like coming across an article about what you had built. So to hear it straight from you is just super cool, and definitely gave me like a new perspective on how to use the tool and how to think about it going forward. So major props. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, thanks for coming.
Sammy asked if you have some works you've already written can Sudowrite use those works to write or contribute to a story in your voice?
So if you're asking like, can you pre-train it with like a corpus of text? It's not exactly like that. And actually GPT-3 isn't set up to do that specifically, but it's pretty good at, if you already have a scene, you have an existing story, you're trying to like do wormholes inside of it. For most part, you don't actually even need to give it like lots and lots of your previous work. So this is actually something that is quite different between GPT-3 and other natural language generators. It's actually built so that it can work with zero shot. Zero shot in this way is like, you don't even have to give it previous examples of what you want it to do. It can figure it out on its own because it's been trained on basically a large majority of the content of like human text, right? That being said, we have some ideas about how maybe you can put in existing stories and us being able to tweak and modify it so that it is more true to your voice. But in general, you don't really need to do that. Alex, that's about mystery.
Yeah, mystery along with fantasy literary.
Yeah. In terms of that twist feature, it will actually work pretty well. Even if you put in a literary plot and you put like sci-fi or fantasy, or if you put in a mystery plot and you put like literary, the AI will pick up on that. This is just sort of extra like priming that we do in the back end if you actually choose sci-fi. So it won't go off the rails. It will detect like, okay, well, someone's been murdered, right? And okay, there's got to be information withheld. So it will understand that because it's seen a lot of mystery novels. So the same goes with like, yeah, if you put in romance, you put in any kind of genre, it will in general work pretty well if you just put the literary genre in.
Yeah, that's actually like really interesting. How does GPT-3 view genre? Because like fantasy, literary, this is all like human created classification systems, basically, to sell books in stores or categorize them in libraries. So how does GPT-3 look at what genre is?
Well, I can't tell you how GPT-3 looks at it because
how do you guys look at it?
But it's, as I said, like it's a very light priming in that sense. It will actually be pretty nuanced. It will know like, okay, like this is a romance story, but actually it's a heist story underneath. Because if you give it those elements in the plot, in the log line, it will pick up on that. So it doesn't see the world in genres. Like, bookstores and gotta put everything in the nice cubes, right?
It's saying like,
so yeah, it's more fluid that way.
DNA of the language and the way this narrative works.
Yeah, exactly. So and that's actually how it differs from maybe previous AI like idea generators, because I think there are not even like AI, but sort of like if else statement like generators, like those things will typically be like, it will get puzzled by it will try putting in these like tropes and it doesn't really follow. That's why GPT-3 is pretty good. It's able to understand that at a deeper level.
Really interesting. Yeah, I've got to pick my brain up off the floor and put it back after this. Yeah, if there aren't any other questions, thank you so much, James, for doing this. It was like, I learned a lot. I hope everyone else had a good time and learned a lot. They're using the party emojis, so I think it was a win.
Nice. Yeah, this is fun.